Good evening. Good evening, everybody. Welcome. Thank you for accepting the invite today. Today we will take you along a great journey, that is the development of vehicles that have raced in the Mille. The vehicles we've driven, we've dreamt about over the years, what you have inherited from this experience. Cars are going to be the chief activist in this today's event. We will also have testimonies from various people who have raced in the Mille race. So before starting off, let's welcome our host, Cavalier Aldo Bonomi, the chairman of Brescia Automobile Club, and Beatrice Sautini, chair lady of the scientific committee of Mille, whom I welcome to come to the stage and talk to you. I can stand, it's not a problem. So go ahead, thank you. To my right. Chairman, this has been a great race over the years. We have all witnessed this. I believe that today, if we go to Piazza Vittoria, we are able to see what's happening. Sorry? So you can see the cars, you can see all the people, all the excitement. You can see the design combined with what we can call this old age. It's not really old age, it's not antique. It's something, it's culture. It's truly a culture, I would dare say. It's an Italian culture because it was conceived in Italy, born in Italy, and it's grown over the years here in Italy. So once again, I can say that we are witnesses to how Mille brings all the people together around this event. Chair lady, we will have fun tonight. So many people to enjoy these four-wheeled beauties, 420 cars, wonderful cars. Many participants, people who have raced in the historical Mille races, more than 120 specimens from before the war. We are talking about great numbers and figures and wonderful cars which will go through these Italian landscapes. So without any doubt whatsoever, I would say that these cars, they will be really tested and tried punished by this journey. And I'll be the first witness to this, including the whole team and the crews that will be in the race. Any problems that may arise, mechanical issues, hiccups here and there, the weather, we've seen today, even the weather played its part. So all these are wonderful challenges we will face head on. It's all part of going through these wonderful landscapes across Italy and enjoying the journey. So all this, even on the other hand, increases the excitement, the joy, pushing forwards, checking, testing, and the healthy kind of competition, which also transforms into all the excitement, the passion, the crowds of people along the roads as we move on. So I would like to remind you that all the vehicles that take part in Mille are eligible, specific features, protocols that are drawn up by the registrar. So these cars are special cars, I would say. We all cherish them a lot, and they have been corrected. And so as concerns eligibility, the uniqueness, the requirements to take part in this wonderful competition. So to us it is very important because, and this is why we have Registro Mille, which we strongly put together because this helps us to outline the uniqueness of these wonderful cars dating from back then, but also trying to find in vehicles of today any features, any details. I'm talking about that embryo, that DNA, that the chief trait that has brought us today. Go ahead. So if Enzo Ferrari used to say that Mille taught Italians to build cars, there must have been a reason for this, and we will try and dig deeper into this. We will dig deep into this. We talk about Mille forme, meaning 1,000 shapes. So we have great designers, but before going on, I would like to call on stage our mayor, Laura Castelletti, who can join us here today, because I have a few questions for her too. Good evening, Brescia. If we look at the crews that have been taking part in Mille Miglia, this is the capital of the world these days. They've brought people from all corners of the globe. So how does it feel to be in this kind of event? We share with Mille Miglia because it's something that's deeply rooted to the town. Piazza Vittoria was wonderful today. Hearing different languages, various languages from all over the world in our town today. This is really, really important because great people in 1927, if we didn't have these dreamers, these people who dreamt about this kind of thing, who would have come up with such an idea? So that is a chance to talk about Brescia all over the world. It's the people who've been here, who've continued to share their stories, who have made this event grow a lot. And today, a whole town comes together. It's been months and months preparing for this event, and we are here to welcome all the people who will come here to come and enjoy this wonderful experience. Thank you so much. A round of applause. Thank you so much. Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Chairman. Thank you so much. So tonight we are going to talk about aerodynamics applied to tame ever-increasing speeds, transforming heroic feats into legendary moments. We are going to talk about current affairs, about collectionism, about preservation, conservation of vehicles, even about the requirements that are required, but we'll get back to this later on. But today, in strict alphabetical order, here are our guests tonight with whom we will talk about cars. Luciano D'Ambrosio, ex-chief designer, Adian Mario Vernacchia, former designer of Pininfarina Aerodynamics and the CEO, and the managing director of Vernacchia Design Group, and Andrea Zagato. Beside me in this evening with me, I'm honored to have Pietro Camardella and Paolo Mazzetti, whom I would like to call on stage with me, former designer, Pininfarina and Fiat Group designer, who designed one of the most cherished vehicles, that's F40. Chairman of the managing committee of Mille Miglia Registro, Paolo Mazzetti. Thank you so much. So we are done with the presentation. So here's to our first guest, Mr. Andrea Zagato, who can join me here on stage. So the microphone, please. Okay. So, good evening. It's a great pleasure to have you with us tonight. Thank you for accepting our invite. Your surname has been tied. You have a great bond with the legend of Mille Miglia. My grandfather used to work with aeroplanes. He had this great idea of combining the bodywork and the aeroplane. You know, the bodywork of a vehicle was designed in Ferrara. You know, Resole used to build. My grandfather came from the aeronautics and was able to blend these different worlds to bring vehicles and aeroplanes together. He used to call them some sort of carlinga, like the aeroplanes carlingas. So the key idea was vehicles built like aeroplanes that would weigh 150 kilograms less. So 150, 200 kilograms lower than all the others with less than 100 horsepower less meant greater handling, and Mille Miglia was the perfect platform to show this difference. Of the 13 Mille Miglia editions, up to 1928, he won 8 of them out of 13. So I don't need to add any more. So let's take some 30 seconds because you are you are really tied to the world of collectionism. So could we have this kind of blend between modern vehicles and the past? That's a kind of journalistic kind of curiosity. I brought about another blend from in the 80s from the aeronautics world, and I built the Soul system, the CAD-CAM in the automobile industry. Our company was the first to use CAD-CAM boards, and we used it on a vehicle that's Alfa Romeo FZ, and this was an idea, and this was a different technological transfer. And then we had another still technological transfer when we started building the smaller vehicles made of carbon and not aluminum. So from 2007 onwards, all our cars have been made of carbon, when even aeroplanes shifted from from aluminum to carbon. So let's talk about two vehicles today. Thanks to Camardella, want to talk about two vehicles. The first one is the Aprilia Sport Zagato. You remember I had the honor to try it as a passenger when you brought it back to life through your technologies. So, Pietro. So, sorry. Okay, here we go. So, this is Alfa Romeos, built for Marchese di Ram. My grandfather is on the extreme right, wearing the overalls and you can see the other guy with, we're in Corso Sempione in Milan, where we were showcasing Alfa Romeo. Then we have other pictures from your family. We can go through this. My grandfather in the 70s, before any produzioni, where we had Flaminia, Lancia, Alfa Romeo TZ. This was the legendary Alfa Romeo. This is my grandfather, dressed stylishly. This is when incorporated the company with my uncle and my father. This is a 1950 replica by Mazzocchi on 4 wheels. And you can see the bodywork. It's still handmade, yet to be finished. Celentano had bought one, Caterina Caselli had bought one. So now, Pietro, take me through this, your first car. These were all the productions by Camardella. So take me through this. To us, this was a lost product. We call it sanction lost. These are some automobile projects that mean a lot to us. But if these projects disappear because these vehicles are dismantled, it's a pity not to be able to see them live. So the computer technology helps us to photometrically measure the picture and try and build the exact dimensions of the vehicle as it was back then. This was one of the first operations in 1937. This car took part in Mille. We had these headlights inside the bodywork. And we also had the mudguards. My grandfather got this idea from an aeroplane wing, overturned, and he built this wonderful aeronautic idea that brought these functions within the bodywork and blended them into one. So this is it means a lot to this journey in the 1930s. So you can see the outer mudguards, the headlights towards the internal within the bodywork. So these cars no longer exist. So from the pictures, we were able to rebuild this car. Then we had Fiat 8V. So on this car, my dad won. He also raced in Mille, and this was my dad's, Gianni Agnelli was my dad's favorite car. This was a masterpiece. It looked like a Ferrari, but it was a Fiat car. It has an 8V engine. So it used to be in the standard production series. In the 55, my dad drove this car in the Avus track in Berlin. This was one of the most difficult, most of the trickiest, one with spectacular accidents in this track. He had never raced. My mom was a bit concerned when he left. He went very Porsche, expected to win the Grand Tourism European event. He went with 14 Porsche, 1446 Carrera, like Italy that beat England at Wembley. We all remember recently. That was the most recent victory we had. But after the war, in the after war, Italians used to work for the Germans. And they went to a German circuit track and they saw an Italian driver on a red Italian car. And they beat the 14 Porsche. And this sour loss brought about that trilogy of Porsche vehicles that brought about what today we call Abarth. It used to be called GT Light, which is the Porsche that won the Grand Tourism Championship in 61, 62, and 63. So we had Targa Florio and others. Then we beat it with the TZ when we invented another car. I would talk about this for hours and hours to no end, but time is not on our side. But you have been the driving force behind many gentlemen. How did you get the CAD solution? The approach was empirical, but then my dad used to run in the Milano, Torino, or Milano Bergamo race, and he would check the kilometer check and see the speed. At some point, they extended and extended and extended, like you could, the tail, like you could see in that Aprilia. They tell me, I don't know whether it's true or it's just an urban legend, but instead of slowing down the car kept on adding speed. So the idea was, we have a longer tail, is working because the airflows could be maintained and we had some great aerodynamics. So empirically speaking, we realized that Professor Camp, we had read from the Polytechnic books, Professor Camp had said the same thing. So he had this theory, having a shorter tail that could move faster than the longer tail. So these cars show us how actually aerodynamics have affected speed a lot. Aerodynamics have affected the aesthetic appeal of vehicles, because when vehicles start taking shape, after the first impact of reducing the horsepower, vehicles were basically like horse carts. Then we started thinking about vehicles in terms of speed. So the idea was looking to the aeroplane, but even the dynamic flow. So designed and conceived in terms of aerodynamics, they were thinking about torpedoes, you know. So we were talking about submarines, you know, or the flying vehicles, so flying cars. So at the beginning, basically, like Zagato was saying, it was all about the feeling, the extended version, the dynamic version, having the wing profile, the fastest thing that you could get. But all in all, the law of aerodynamics was still at the beginning. But we have to say that the first ideas about aerodynamics were at the beginning of everything. They all come from Leonardo, the first person who understood that aerodynamics slow down instead of pushing forward. So then Galileo Galilei decided that I have to read this one because it's a bit complicated. Because I am more of a designer, but he realized that dynamic resistance is proportional to the square root of the speed. So here we are talking about high mathematics and science. So at the beginning, it was in the 18th century, in the 19th century. They used to call, what used to call stables at the beginning. This is where we had objects with wires that people started to look at. And we had to go back to design aerodynamics, physics, studying, design. And then we had the regulations. In 1951, something changed. First, we mentioned something Zagato mentioned about the mud guards all vehicles had, and they were detached from the body of the car because people thought that if you save on weight, you could be faster. But then, thanks to these Aprilia and other cars that came in the early years after the war, all vehicles, like you can see, in 1951, like most of these car makers, decided that we cannot have mudguards detached from the vehicle, but they have to be attached to the car. So the new ones were designed, obviously, with a single body. But like you can see in Mille, if you go to Piazza Vittoria, you will realize that many, before 1951, they had to weld pieces of metalwork to it.
And we will get to that point later, because of course Mille was there even before the war. We will see there is a coexistence between models born in different ages. So I thank Andrea Zagato, thank you so much. And we now call on the stage Mario Vernacchia, former engineer in Pininfarina for aerodynamics. He will tell us when physics had an impact on the beautiful, or at least the beautiful as it was intended to that point. We have OM 65 Superba. There is something to say about this car, right? Well, yes, first of all, hello everybody, thank you for being present today. I would simply like to introduce a topic by mentioning what is my experience in aerodynamics. Started in 1981 at Pininfarina, where I gave my duties as a stylist, as they used to call me back then. And then I was developing aerodynamics for all the vehicles as well. But please just explain that, because designers nowadays are managers. You were stylists. That's what you're mentioning, right? Yes, that's an inside joke. The denomination changed over the years for the creative roles inside companies. In this specific case, we used to deal with many, many things, among them aerodynamics, to safeguard and to oversee the development in terms of style, not by destroying completely the style, but trying to have optimal aerodynamic performances with some attention, so that we would not be too invasive on the car. But talking about Mille, I shall mention briefly how the shape of the cars evolved throughout the years, starting from 1927 to 1957 with three typical examples. The first one, very iconic, is the OM665 Superba, which is the car that won the first edition of Mille in 1927. As you can see, this is a destructured vehicle. My colleagues back then used to say that there were still similarities between these cars and the coaches driven by horses. So you can see the cockpit more or less like a coach, with a volume stemming from there, from the up to the radiator, as you can see. I'm sorry, there is a technical difficulty with the screen, but from the radiator you can see the volume where the engine was placed. And the wheels and the fenders, as already mentioned, were completely external to the main body of the car, and this was to the detriment of aerodynamics. Therefore, what would happen, as you can imagine, is there were many vortexes, many discontinuity areas for the airflow. The CX, as we call it aerodynamically speaking, would show very high values. But truth be told, these sport races, specifically Mille Miglia, as it is a competition that puts on the road production models on road circuits, road tracks that are normal, they would prompt car builders to improve the performances for all the cars, to be an excellence and attract commercially many more sales. So they started working on mechanics, they started working on lightening the weight of the car, and also on aerodynamics. But still, it's an aerodynamics quite intuitive. There is not real tangible proof, experimental proof. The first wind tunnels for cars start to appear in the 1950s. The progress that started in those years up until the beginning of the 40s, end of 30s, beginning of 40s, is coming from aerodynamic studies. Paul Jarret is one of the experts from Austria that carried out in the 1930s advanced project in aerodynamics, but still with an eye to the aesthetics. That's what made him a winner, because he was always paying attention to the aesthetics. He was inspired by aerodynamics features such as wing, the droplet as the best shape defined by air, so we have drop shapes. Among them, there is the Alfa Romeo 6C 2300. As you can see, if we decompose the volume, there is a central part of the body of the car which is actually a droplet, and it is intertwined in the back part by a horizontal wing creating the posterior fenders. So it's a droplet plus a wing. The two fenders, posterior fenders, are anterior fenders, are droplets again in the shape and combined to the main body of the car. But there is no still perfect interjunction, so we have areas, critical areas, that generate vortexes. The aerodynamic is much better. The airflow is improved, but there are still some critical areas. The real leap in terms of quality happened with cars designed as unique volume, which means that wheels and fenders are integrated in the bodywork. An example in terms of cars participating to the Mille Miglia is the Ferrari Mondial 500 that in 1957 was presenting this car. As you can see, visually speaking, it looks very aerodynamic. The front part is very low, the windshield is also very tilted and very wrapping of the cockpit, and the bodywork is very soft. And this expresses an aerodynamic DNA. But that's not really the case if we go deeper. Years later, as a matter of fact, as Andrea Zagato already mentioned, the cut tail has been found to be much more efficient than this other solution. You can see the tail of the car, which is very round-shaped, and this would create some turbulent wake, quite large in terms of size. It's like opening up an umbrella behind the car. So this is breaking down, it's slowing down the car. This car, with a cut tail area, would have been much better in terms of performance. The other critical point is the front part, because this creates an evading surface towards the bottom, and with high-speed air, it would create vertical push that we find also in wings of airplanes, the same type of push. And this makes the car hard to control because it is pushed upwards. These are the steps of the evolution of the shape of the car for the age from 1927 to 1957 when we talk about Mille Miglia. Thank you so much. Pietro, I was not able to stop Vernacchia because as I see these beauties behind me and seeing them told by him is something unique, so I was not able to stop him. But we have to trace back to some topics. Can you please connect the evolution, aerodynamically speaking, of these three models in a synthesis? Well, you see, Vernacchia is a friend of mine. Mario Vernacchia is a former colleague in Pininfarina. He is the one who saved F40 from Cosacci because he was interfacing between the wind tunnel and the company. But that's another issue. The thing is, in the 30s, we had already the first wind tunnels, the first studies of cars in wind tunnels. We can say safely that the aesthetics were more important than the performance. On one side, because the measurement was not up to the standards we have today, but also in the common idea, the fluid shape were the one considered faster, more dynamic. Ferrari himself took a lot from the Jaguar Type E, and he forced his suppliers to make the cars similar to the Type E. But the Type E has the same issue of lift in the front part. So in 1938 we see a new Fiat car that is given up on the beautiful classical style to embrace the new ideas. Of course, here, as you can see, there is a lack of understanding. They tend to make the tail of the car as long as possible with the idea that the car becomes more evasive, but instead it becomes less controllable because it would not stay on the road. It also comes because of Giacosa, an engineer, designer of the Topolino. He found that the Familiare, the station wagon you would say, was faster than the normal Topolino, but they didn't understand why. It was due to the cut tail. So we have here models. This is a prototype, and then in 48 it would come with a hunchback, because you can see the shape behind is like this. It would take a lot of time for them to realize that the correct way forward is the one told by Zagato, with a cut tail. And there is also a methane version of this car, right? Yeah, just don't talk about that. We don't have the time, but there are many versions. Yes, there is also one working with coal. But then, of course, it was due to the lack of gasoline. There was no fuel available. So they would try anything, really, as fuel to push forward the cars. They were very slow, but they would still move. Okay, thank you so much, Mr. Vernacchia. Thank you really so much. And now we welcome Luciano D'Ambrosio, former designer of Bertone, in the 90s, he stresses shapes and volumes for a future that is now approaching. Something happened in the Mille, and during certain years we have cars belonging to a past and Italy coming back from the rubble of the war is finding new ways of building cars. Well, I think the main thing to say is exactly that the gentlemen drivers of the past were people with quite an affluence. They had the money to realize one-off cars made bespoken to them and with very high costs. What happened in the first years of the 1950s, there is a new phenomenon, the Alfa Romeo phenomenon, where a new car is introduced. It's a coupe car, the Giulietta, that is winning the races. So there is a new feeling of the car that you can drive during the week for your family, for work or whatever. And if you're good, you can race with the same car on Sunday and you can maybe win. So there is a new idea of what is possible. In the 50s and 60s, the highways in Italy were free, so who wanted to could go there and speed as much as they could. As an offspring of the Giulietta, we have the Giulietta Sprint, which is a product that is not just a coupe, and it's the spirit of the Giulietta. It's also a sports car, so it gives the suggestion of a car that can offer something more than just being a regular transportation mean. And the Giulietta was born because Finmeccanica opens up to a bond and it gives to people who wants to take part into that fund a certain number of the Giulietta Berlina. Unfortunately, in 1954, the car is not ready yet. So they find that inside the warehouse of the Alfa Romeo there is a prototype ready to be made, and it is not yet the final Giulietta Sprint, but it is something that can be shaped up to be that. So they decide to build about 50 specimens of the car, and so they can overcome the issue of the delays to maintain the promise of the bond bearers. So they can realize this small batch of 50 cars. Inside this situation, the engineer, Mr. Ruska, comes in. He's a person very important as the head of engineering in Alfa Romeo, and to Bertone, who was the recipient of this role, he exerts a lot of pressure so that they move up from 50 up to minimum 1,000 units. That means from an artisan company to an industrial company. To make it short, in the Turin Salon of 1954, 700 orders coming directly to Alfa Romeo. And the Giulietta Sprint ends its career with 40,000 vehicles produced. So it was a commercial success. And most of all, it made the owner believe that this object can be used to race. As you are in the city, in the highway, in the mountains, you can have the right product to have fun. And the Giulietta Sprint, as a matter of fact, you can see from the picture, this is the Giulietta Sprint Veloce. If you think now of the sport versions of the regular cars you can buy, you have larger tires, longer fenders, a lower setting of the vehicles. There are many aspects featuring sports versions of traditional cars. The Sprint Veloce just has 3 more headlights in front, and that's barely it. So this is something that can be traced back to racing as well, because it has a better performance, a better engine. But in the looks, it is so similar to the Sprint version that the Sprint buyer can really think that they can do the same that the Veloce car can do. So this is quite interesting to think. And I also remember that it was a way of boasting of your wealth, because those headlights in front work as bumpers. So they were very expensive headlights, and they would explode at the minimum contact. Yeah, there is a bit of melancholy if you see this type of Italy. This is where Alfa Romeo was born, and many people are mourning the loss of this type of Alfa Romeo. But on top of all that, there is a special attention given to this sector. We were perceiving it in this model, but for Bertone it was much stronger, right? Yes, we have Franco Scaglione. He was a person that made of his life the application of his philosophy. You can see that in the Bertone, applying the aerodynamic concepts to the car. These are the BAT 5, 7, and 9, and they are called BAT 1, the Fiat Abarth 750, which was actually the first exercise in aerodynamics from Franco Scaglione, and he put all the principles that he applied then to the BAT aerodynamic technical.
So this is an expression that English people liked a lot, the word but. It's really a wonderful word, but besides this, we are talking about a very low front part. We are talking about the fairing. We are talking about the front mudguards, the split of the air intake at the front to create some airflows in the engine, which were then released behind the wheels, the rear wheels. So what you can look like some air releases, but this is for the release of the hot air from the engine. So like Pietro was saying previously, this was a detailed work of design. So like you can see, this hood was designed as very low hood, and then it could impact against a windshield that was designed, if you remember, the others had a windshield that was inclined by 60 degrees. So with technological development over the years, many changes were introduced with time. We had 2 curvatures. Glass could not be bent like we can do today, but they were pretty advanced. You can see the side glasses inclined by 45 degrees. It's like a drop that's made transparent, like in a cockpit. At the rear, you can see this profile. Today would be called fastback, but the drop per se is too short to feature in this kind of dimensions. We have an Alfa Romeo 1900 with 100 horsepower. So we are talking about some very heavy thing that's a bit boring, but it could go at 200 per hour because of that profile. Talking about speed, we talked about what we would have discussed afterwards, and the question would have been for Pietro Camardella. But were they working? Paul Fair article, by your answer, Paul Fair was a great journalist and also a driver. In '54, he tried the BAT5, and I was astonished by the stability on the straight. It was really high, and it also responds well to the side wind because we have this closed profile at the rear. So they extend the cockpit, what cannot be extended by the cockpit. So at some point it's short, and the fins maintain the side flow, and the car is really stable. This adds more stability to the car. So, Paolo, let me, the bat have little to do with Mille Miglia, if not for the trends that affect the race. The vehicles become faster and faster. But as concerns glasses are very important, because if you look at the most sports performing vehicles, as long as they could be carved as far as technology would take us, you can see they have this central abutment. They were a little bit more performing in terms of aerodynamics. So glass played a major role in terms of speed. Let me say something about Giulietta, because this is one of the most famous Mille Miglia events, and everyone wants to talk about Giulietta. So I'm pretty curious about this. So the first sprint in 1957 ranked 10th amongst many Ferraris, Porsche, with the famous Sgorbati brothers. But not only 1,300 horsepower, cubic meters, but it could really take curves and bends in a way that they could negotiate the curves and bends much faster than higher performing sports vehicles. So times had changed. This was not about marketing, but it was reality. But if you look back at the magazines back then, the advertisement, Alpha advertisement back then was 10th in Mille Miglia, the winner in 1,300 cubic meter vehicles. So many saloon cars were 1,100. So Pietro, I had to cut you short. But Giulietta was Italy's fiancée. So that takes us back to how much aerodynamics affected. Think about the bat 9. The front part was the Giulietta front. So all the aerodynamic shapes were what had been established as the ideal shape. So it was transferred to the last bat, and that's all there is to it. So that's all I had to say about this. So we have learned a lot. Thanks to Luciano D'Ambrosio. Thank you so much, Luciano. A big round of applause for Luciano. So now we leave the floor to Laura Confalonieri. Like promised at the beginning, she will take us through a very special journey, a wonderful journey. So the vice chairman of Ruoteclassiche. Thank you so much. Good evening everyone. Thank you, Marco. So up to now, we've seen how about the pursuit for performance in Mille Miglia changed design, how the designers and the body makers had to find faster and more efficient solutions. But today, we want to take a leap back in time and see what it was like to drive these vehicles. We have a special guest tonight, a true veteran of Mille Miglia, Frecciarossa, the chairman of the club, Mille Miglia Club, this group that brings together all people who have taken at least to one edition of the historical Mille Miglia event, who were ranked in the classification. Alfredo Compellotti. Thank you so much. Thank you, Alfredo. Good evening, Alfredo. Welcome. Welcome, and thank you for being with us tonight. Alfredo, 1931, born in 1931, and my compliments to you, really. 3 Mille Miglia, 1953, 54, and 55. And many other memorial ones. So, which vehicles did you use? I have to take a leap back with time. Once, the majority age was not 18. I lost my dad when I was only 7. And so I grew up with my mom and my brother. My mom was very concerned. At 17, I had my driving license. But I could not drive a car. I had to wait 21 years of age. And I turned 21 in June. And my brother, with a few sacrifices here and there, we were able to buy a Topolino 500C. Obviously, it's money for the car and enter the race. was for the lowest category. That was normal tourism. Topolini was 98 kilometers per hour on a decent slope. 1,500 on that kilometers on that average speed. At the end of the day, it took us more than 20 hours. But you also raced on a 4 horsepower. So we were sponsored and we bought the 4 horsepower. But this 750 category, so we had to make the engine, to tune the engine, and we could reach 130 kilometers per hour. It was a little bit faster. Given that the hood, because the engine was at the rear, the hood was empty, we added extra fuel tanks so as to have lesser stopovers on the way. So it took us some 17 hours, slightly more than 17 hours to get to destination. We saw the certificate that used to be issued at the end of the race, and that shows that you raced in this race 1,600 kilometers in slightly less than 18 hours. That's 91 kilometers per hour on the roads back then. With this kind of cars, how could you keep that average speed? Oh, you had to push that car. Just push down on that accelerator. That was the only way. You just had to keep on pushing. The only thing, we would stop over just for the seals and then to refuel. But 70 years ago, to fine-tune a car like this, we didn't have a lot of money to spend. So the pulley increasing the revolutions, we had to get an old pulley from elsewhere. And after Ferrara, at one point, the pulley broke. In Ferrara, we needed a dynamo to charge the battery. At one point, with my brother, what did we decide to do? We stopped over. In that year, luckily, there were diesel vehicles racing and they were slower than us. And they had left before us. So we waited for a diesel vehicle and we waited for them and we followed them for some time, but we couldn't see the road clearly. My brother didn't realize that there was a crossing barrier, a crossing level for the trains, and we hit the crossing level barriers and we wrote the exhausts at the front. And so we rode the rest of the race without the exhaust pipe. So you can just imagine what actually happened. But that's a medal for resilience, hard won on the ground. You didn't have the mechanics, you did everything on your own. Refueling, for example. You had an extra fuel tank to reduce the number of stopovers, but once in a while you had to stop over. Maybe there were some checkpoints where we had to get the seal. We didn't have we had to go with these jerry cans. And so we would fill up the jerry cans and proceed. This was a very long race and very tricky. The conditions were quite challenging, very punishing. You didn't know much about the roads. When we started Topolino, we were just a group of friends. We went all the way to Ferrara for the test trials. So this was quite interesting for us because we were young back then, but obviously we never had a logbook. So during the day, the signposts would be taken away by people, and I always wondered, especially I've always been surprised, between the stage between Pescara and Rome, we would enter into a tunnel where I would meet only some herds of sheep with no people along the way, and so it was really challenging. When we used to talk about, Mille, we talk about Porsche, BMW, Alfa Romeo, high-performing vehicles, but Mille was also about and above all people with normal cars like you. How was it like to compete against these giants? our late friend and former chairman, Paolo Lena, used to say that Mille is made up of by the young people of the choirs and other high-performing people. We were the choir people. So the people registered in the Mille Club, and it was a great honor for us to compete against these giants. I registered in 1953 for the first time, and I'm still a member up to date. And I've been a counselor, I've been the treasurer, I've played various roles. Obviously, I've been a honorary chairman, but they won't let me go. But I'm still here. I think it's something you really earned out there on the field. So, one of the most beautiful things of Mille Miglia, like it's the people along the way, the people cheering you all the way. How were the people back then? People were quite excited, just like today. So in the last kilometers from Mantua to Brescia, you couldn't see the road because people were all over the place. When people, you would sit in the middle of the road and then they heard the, the roar of the engines, they would get out of the way. So we had to take the central part of the road all the way. And then the idea was it's not a Ferrari who changed the rules, but it's they had to change some things because when people would drop by at 300 kilometers per hour, people could not control the vehicles because people were in the middle of the road. Because back then there was quite high speed. If anything happened, the speed was too much, so they had to reduce the speed at some point. Before I let you go, I would like to hear from you something, an anecdote, something you can take us with you in the cockpit of your car, in one of your Frecciarossa. There was a lot of tension, it was nerve-wracking. But our electrical engineer used to would prepare a vehicle in a way that sometimes you would like switch on one thing and something different would go off. So it was all like an adventure all the way. So it was all part of the game. It was some sort of disadventure, but it's all challenges you faced. But also you'd need some short call or long call. You never had plastic back then. We used to carry some hot water bag, and you'd open the window and you'd throw. Maybe your stuff would end up someone behind you. What about eating? Our parents would prepare some sandwiches, but it was so nerve-wracking that you never felt even hungry. The adrenaline, you had the shot of energy you couldn't even sleep. You drive for 20 hours in a row, 17 hours in a row on the road. That was really, really a great fatigue, but the excitement was too much. Alfredo, thank you so much. Thank you for having taken us down this memory lane, for having taken us with you in this journey. Thank you so much. Thank you, everybody. Thank you so much. And I'll leave the floor again to Marco Pascali and his guests. Here we go. Once again, here we go to this final stretch. A few words with Pietro Camarella and Paolo Mazzetti, who I would call back on stage with us. So one thing, hearing a driver, a 92-year-old driver, talking, no, 92 years, sorry, talking with so much excitement in his voice about his experience. Looking back at this, Giulietta, looking at these things that have gone down the books of history in the automobile industry in terms of fun and joy. It's really interesting. This should be food for our thoughts. So let's go back to this at the future of collectionism. So with social media today, we have a different way of looking at vehicles. These vehicles, I think they wouldn't be allowed in any city, in any town, but they are bringing up new opportunities in terms of conserving vehicles, about rest mode, retro mode. So we are talking about classic wheels. We see it every day. So let me go back to Mazzetti. So let's talk about customization. I think all these, we have a new form of enjoying vehicles. It's not about just preservation. So let's say that all this has to do with financial, with economic issues. I have to build what makes money for me. No one has money to throw away. So I also realized there is a change of generation compared to those who brought the historical automobile events. So we are talking about those back born in 19, today were 8 years of age. Today we have the youth who are not used to this kind of vehicles. Like for example in Germany, we have we were talking about this Italian company that's building engines for 300 SL with seagull wings. We have this kind of power steering, bringing power steering into this kind of vehicles. Obviously, we cannot accept this because these are vehicles that have been retrofitted. But I would say that modernizing today, we are talking about rebuilding replicas, basically. And these are just some wonderful designs we have. Like you can see, I'm in my work gear today. So they are from Argentina, and they are reconstructing, rebuilding ancient, antique vehicles, reproducing them perfectly.
Everything is new, everything is declared, so they are not hiding anything in that. But what could happen is somebody might buy those cars and try to make them look older. Something that happened lately is that a person applied with a real, authentic Bugatti, then they buy the sunk, they change the plate, and he put the one of the original Bugatti, and took the papers of the original car, and he was hoping to fake us like that. When we catched him red-handed, he said, "Yeah, I tried. No luck. Maybe next time." So this is a trend lately we see. So how about the stance of the Mille committee towards the international approach? Because there are other cultures, other trends that might be not as strict as yours with your same philosophy. Well, yeah, you see, for the British, for example, it's quite common for them to optimize the car. For example, the Triumph, the TR2 had drum brakes, with the TR3 Triumph is the first using disc brakes for the masks in '66. All the TR2s from England have the disc brake because they are saying, well, I'm not stupid, I don't want to brake less than others. We have brakes made for this car, I just replaced them. Same applies to Jaguar SK 120, 150, they have the disc brakes, so you can find the drum brakes on the 120s and they replace them. But this is optimization. The same applies to components of the engine. It's improvements that you can do to older vehicles. And this is not something we accept because we say that the car must be the same as it was produced. But the car is not fake when this happens. Then we have owners of Bentleys, for example. Most of the Bentleys were sedans. If I buy a sedan like that, I shorten the bodywork and I put on a bodywork in Le Mans style. So I increased the value from 120,000 euros to €1 million. Well, maybe you can get away with that, but in the past years it was easier. There was no internet, there was no database, so many people could get away with that. So we are saying that there is malice behind it, but let's say that I enjoy doing it because there is a type of voyeurism, right? We see a lot of that in the Anglo-Saxon world, in America as well. Yeah, but I think that the real aficionado, the real fan, wants to feel the real original steering wheel. Pay attention. We are learning that Mazzetti owns irregular cars. Oh yes, I do have irregular cars in my garage, but I don't use them in the Mille Miglia. Let's be clear. But yes, I know that this is something well known. People do that for fun. But when you own a fake car, well, I wouldn't like that really. Well, as for the other phenomenon, the educational reconstructions, well, yeah, this is another topic, and we accept that. This is something that we also accept. This year we have an Alfa Romeo HC 2009, I think. It was a one-off model back then. It was destroyed, so this person made it built. I think he paid it more than if it was built anew. But it's a way to show somebody who never saw the car to witness an extraordinary car. It has a coefficient 0, that means they cannot rank, and it is written clearly that it is an educational reconstruction. BMW did the same with the CAM in 1940. BMW, you can see the picture here. This car didn't win. The one made by Turing, the super light one won. They are very similar, with a bean-like frontal part, and that was sensational because we're talking about aerodynamics, and Alfa Romeo with the 2005 much powerful engine thought they could dominate the race, but BMW with the 2000 engine, not 2500, they were regardless faster, they were lighter, because they used to say that the enemy is the wind, the air, and the way. So they had to be light and aerodynamic. So BMW in 2010, they decided, as the car was destroyed in its unique model, to rebuild it and display it in a museum. But this is something done purposely because we wouldn't be able to see this car otherwise. If you do that for economic reasons, you build the Bugatti 35 from scratch just for economic reasons. Because it's not easy to rebuild these cars. It's easier to make fake cars with the open cars from the 30s and 40s, or when it's justified by price. For Ferraris, for example, you take a 250 GT or a Europa, it's still expensive car, but keep in mind it's 300,000 euros. But you can keep the original structure, and you get to a car that is worth 5 up to 10 million euros. And this is something else that we are talking lately a lot about, because passion used to have a social aspect to it, a society that was very good, looking at the future. And there is a form of nostalgia here because people want things that are unavailable nowadays. These are reconstruction, revisitations of cars, and this is another one, actually, another educational reconstruction for BMW, the Garmisch reconcept that was made in 2019 based on the concept of the 1970 by Bertone to rebuild its history. and also giving pride to our story. And this is something else. A private asked to Lamborghini to rebuild the Countach, and from LP 500 to LP 400, it was rebuilt in 2021. These are all legal operations, of course, based on a V12 modern concept of the car. It's a Countach that is renewed in a way. Well, yeah, this is a different topic. It's something that more controversial, I'd say, but I would only like to say something in favor of the reconstruction if it is educational. In terms of Lancia, it's not an architecture. It might be built by many reasons, by bombing, by lack of conservation. Is it correct to build a fake car? Well, in that case, it's okay. In terms of cars, it is something made with a serial production, mass production. So you can do that to readapt the product to the industry of today. The problem is when you do something that is old but something new that is in the style of the old, there are a specification some specification we have to make. We are more tolerant when we talk about cars built in at the beginning of 1920s. Those are cars that are impossible to find spare parts for. So if you find part of the car, we push you to rebuild the car completely. For example, the Ansaldo, the Kiribati. These are cars that are disappeared now, but in that case, it's interesting. It's worth to rebuild the car. And then from Lamborghini, we see a retrospective for the contemporary design to the Mille of back then. It's the Manta Modulo Strato Zero. Those are cars, four cars that are bound to change completely the approach to the sports car. Yes, it's about what we were mentioning earlier, when aerodynamics had impact on style, and here you see that because style also progresses, not just aerodynamics. Well, yeah, of course, we are in 1968. The first wind tunnel, real size, was made by Pininfarina in 1972. Fiat comes in 1976, the first wind tunnel. At the time, we only had the Polytechnic of Turin with a small-scale wind tunnel. There, they made all their studies. They tried out the bat that should be 020 in terms of performance in a wind tunnel. The same would apply to the Manta. Now, of course, a small-scale car have different interactions with wind, but they wouldn't know that back then. Anyway, this is the style that goes well beyond the obstacle. You see, the lower front is becoming real. So we see the Bizzarrini Manta and the Carab as well at the same time. One is presented in October, one in November. So who invented it, we don't know. But the designers back then, we don't know what they would say. They think they are the first. Martin says that he made his car in 67, but it was presented in 70. So unless there was an escape of information, nobody saw it. So it was not copied by anybody. The thing is that at a certain time, this idea was buzzing around. Even if you are in Dallas or in Turin, you reach the same results. So back then, the the wedge shape was real. And you can see Giugiaro that builds his own little design with the Manta, which is a perfect wedge with a cut cocktail shape, again for the fluxes that would create disturbances. Then the modulo, another masterpiece. You can see it's a perfect wedge with a cut tail, and it is reminding us of the moon landing. It's called Module. The name of the car is Module. And there is a separation of two shells, like attached one to another. And it also reminding us of the moon module, the lunar module. I was 13 years old back then. I remember we had the TV in the classroom to follow the moon landing. And then you see the years 70, 71. You understand from this card that it was a moment of change and many ideas contrasting one with another. We have the modulo on one side, and then we have again a wedge on the other side by Gandini. Interesting to see how modulo and zero became once again queens of styles, even for generations that had nothing to do with all that. Because two collectionists bought these cars and they made a history out of these cars. Well, that's true. I can tell you there is a lot of love for the Italian cars of that time. Unfortunately, only for that time. And just to wrap up this journey through the cars, you can see Giugiaro that reached finally the spiky shapes of Gandini with his final wedge shape with the boomerang by Maserati. Now these are cars taking to the extreme these shapes. It's impossible to drive them. They're very uncomfortable. You have to lay down inside of them. I would hit my knees against the steering wheel. I tried out the Stratos, and I remember that the steering wheel was right on your knees, but they would still shake up the market, and create a new style. From there, we have modern cars. First of them, the Giulietta of '77 by Armando Cressone, which was head of the style center of Alfa Romeo, the first architect to be the head of a style center. He was taking this idea of the wedge and putting it on a sedan, because Giugiaro and all the others would still work on sports cars, on the Sprint and the other models we mentioned. But he was the one who brought this to mass production cars.
Wonderful. Let me take this time to thank Mille. It's great talking about cars. This was a great opportunity to do this. We had prestigious guests tonight who joined us today. Talking about this, I would like to call on stage a person who has driven this car recently. And Mille asked how they could have told us, recounted. So, Mr. Fulvio, the stage is yours. Thank you. Just a quick hello. Thank you, everyone. Heartfelt gratitude to all people who came and stayed all the way. And thank you so much to our speakers who have made this evening memorable. When I am new in this world, so I started this activity. I was called by some important people, Bonomi and Elisabetta Sautini, to try and increase the content, to try and express, widen our horizons. So tonight we've tried to keep to this word, and we have had testimonials. We have had people who've taken us through almost a whole century of design, and they have helped us to understand. I say I am new in this world, but they open a glimpse into why people love these vehicles. It's like the history of art. You can see wonderful things around you, But if near you, you have someone who can explain you and tell you the history and what's behind, the driving force behind these things, you see it from a different perspective. Another thing I would like to say, we have had testimony. It's from people saying it's not just a race. There's more to it. It's always been a place of research, transferring technology, and this has been crucial to the entire Italian industry because the automotive industry has been the backbone of our country. If we are in the G7 today, if we're in Europe, we owe this to the automotive industry. So this heritage of information should not be lost. And Mille is one of the players who can keep these memories alive and keep the memory of these events with an eye to the future. So here in Brescia, we are doing all it takes to create. We have a major supply chain here in Lombardy with more than 100 schools, and we have to transfer this information to the new generations. I would like to wind up, and I hope that it's been a wonderful evening like it's been for me. I hope that this can be the first of many events like this, and we'll try to address different topics. We've addressed design, we have talked about development of material, mechanics, safety, material. So we've gone through different topics in the development and how things have evolved over time. And so I'd like to ask you, experts, if you have any ideas, bring them to us, bring them to our attention for the future editions. Thank you so much. So at this point, I would like to call to stage Mr. Camardella. I would like to thank you so much for the journey you've taken us through. As someone in the business, I have had a great opportunity to work with Pietro. I've sat on an F40 for once, thanks to you. Macaus, our friend, yesterday sent me some testimony, said even about fluid dynamics. So this could be a different topic for a different talk in the future. So I would also like to call on stage Mr. Paolo. Thank you so much, Paolo. He has many, many stories and anecdotes to tell. He's unbeatable in that field. We are ahead of time by 4 minutes, so we've almost been perfectly on time. If you have 4 minutes to spare, why not? Oh no, jokes aside, thank you so much. Thank you so much to all you who have attended this event, all of you who've stayed with us all the way to the end. Thank you so much. Mille as a whole. Frecciarossa. Thank you to the authorities. This is wonderful. This location is wonderful. Like people would say, thank you, thank you. Thank you so much. I'm very happy. It's been a great honor. If you say that you had an E40 when you were young, I would say that was the car of our dreams, even back in the day. And this is a goal achieved. So let's wind up in this room. The prize awarding event is to take place here. So the prize awarding event is to be held in this room. So at this point, amongst us, among the big group, Luciano and everyone, please come to stage. We can take a picture together. Thank you so much, and to the next